Hey guys, welcome to the much anticipated, long awaited Van Gogh Letters 88. While it has been fraught with delays, yeah, it is kind of tough subject matter as well. So, that's kind of another reason why I wanted to do sort of give it my due diligence. Good to see you, Robbie Robin. Lamtoon, I see you here as well. We will be looking at that article about the turbulent skies of Starry Night aligning with scientific theory. That's according to a study. There's a quick look at that theory. You can just see that over there. There's another article on Salon dealing with the same thing. And then also, I think it's the Smithsonian. So pretty high, you know, um, quality publications dealing with this um, Kolmogorov's theory of turbulence. And they say, suggesting that the artist was a careful observer of the world around him. Quite a compliment if you think about it in that sense. We're also going to look at something from the art newspaper. It's this article over here 10 surprises at the National Gallery's five-star Van Gogh exhibition. There's also something from BBC News about it. Rave reviews from critics. This is all up to the minute. This is happening right now, in the world. And then I don't know whether I can access this article. Just give me a second. Okay, looks like I can't. Not on this computer. Okay, never mind that one. Anyway, we're gonna deal with the letter from Dr. Peyron to Theo on 3rd or 4th of September. I think we need to go backwards to this letter on the 3rd or 4th of September. Have we dealt with these letters? I think we've dealt with this letter on the 22nd of August. Have we dealt with this letter on the 3rd or 4th of September? Can anyone remember? Deborah, good to see you here. Lisa, good to see you as well. So, look, I can't quite remember if we did deal with this letter, but since we're trying to get back up to speed, if there's a slight overlap, I think that's okay. So let's jump right into it. Chelsea, good to see you. I know Chelsea was disappointed that I cancelled a couple of times. Good to see you. Yeah. Okay, so it is September, and we are dealing with this letter from the 3rd or the 4th of September. I'm pretty sure that we did deal with this letter because I know we dealt with this artwork and this one. Maybe we should actually go back slightly further. Just have a look. Yeah, I think we have dealt with this. Okay, so let's deal with this letter here. And so this is the last letter we hear from Vincent for quite a while. It's a pleasure, Robbie. From the 22nd of August, and then you don't hear anything from him till the 3rd or 4th of September, even going beyond that. So it looks like there was a gap of about 2 weeks, at least 2 weeks, right? And so what does that tell you? It tells you that when he's distressed, he doesn't write letters, right? When he's distressed, he doesn't really communicate, right? So anyway, let's begin. My dear Theo, I thank Joe very much for having written and know that you want me to drop you a line. I must let you know that it is very difficult for me to write. So there he is saying it. I must let you know it's difficult for me to write. My head is so deranged, right? So, it's not as though he keeps his card so close to his chest that he he's private about it, right? When he's in a state of derangement or a state of mental anguish, he says so, he communicates it. And why is this important? Well, if we're dealing with him wanting to end his life, then isn't he going to communicate that as well? Isn't he going to write a note regarding that as well, right? So he says, I'm taking advantage of an interval. Dr. Peyron is very kind to me and very patient. You can imagine that. And there he says, I'm terribly distressed because the attacks have come back when I was already beginning to hope that it would not return. So, it's not like he's incapable of acknowledging weakness. He is. And in fact, he's pretty eloquent at how he says it. Somebody else might just write one line and say, I can't talk to you now. I feel like I'm going mad. This is quite a well-conceived letter for a deranged individual, right? And he says, I'm terribly distressed because the attacks have come back. And notice how he describes it. He describes it as attacks, as sudden moments that are out of his control. A sudden onslaught of let's call it mental illness, and then it passes. I think even better description of what you're talking about is an episode. An episode comes on and then it passes, almost like epilepsy. And I think epilepsy is a very good analogy for what we're talking about, but I don't think it is epilepsy. I do think it's a degenerative condition. I do think it's related to neurosyphilis. And in the same way that you can have bacterial infections, for example, in your mouth or somewhere else, that they can come and go depending on your immunity. I think he's having a similar thing that's really affecting his mental and cognitive ability, right? So, but not to the extent that he can't say what he's going through. He says it feels like an attack, and it's distressing him, and that's understandable. Anyway, let's continue. He says, it would be a good thing if you perhaps wrote a word to Dr. Peyron to tell him that working on my pictures is almost a necessity for my recovery. Now, actually, I do remember we did cover this. And so I think what is happening here is Dr. Peyron is kind of going, when you go out and paint, you seem to have these episodes. So I think let's try preventing you from painting. Maybe you're getting too excited by painting, by being inspired by this whole painting process. But perhaps it's not good for you. And Van Gogh is basically saying, please write to him and just tell him, I need this, right? And so he says, for these days, without anything to do and without being able to go to the room they've allotted me to do my painting in, are almost intolerable. And so what he's saying here is essentially the recipe for him to feel less distressed, the recipe for him to tolerate the anguish he's going through is to allow him to paint. And so another way of interpreting that is to say, when he's painting, he's less distressed. When he's painting, he's kind of taking control. When he's painting, he's fighting in a way. He's fighting for his mental health. He's also getting some joy and satisfaction in his daily life, right? Anyway, let's continue. So he says, I've received a catalog from that. Then he says here, for many days I've been absolutely wandering, as in awe, just as much, if not worse, and presumably the attacks will come back again in the future. It is abominable. So there again, it's not like he's incapable of admitting weakness, that he's hiding it away. He's being very open about it, right? He says, I hope it is not complaining too much if I tell you these details, but I do it to prove that I'm not yet in a condition to go to Paris or to Pont-Aven. So, he's not trying to put a artificial veneer on this. He's not trying to make it seem less bad than it is. In fact, he's saying, I don't really have it in me to leave here. I need to stay where I am. I can't go to Paris. I can't go to you. I can't go to Ponthaven. And then he says, look at that. It seems that I gather dirt and eat it. Right? So he's really in a distressed state. And arguably, right now, is in one of the, if not the most distressed states that he's ever been in. Is up there. It's like in the top three most distressed states we've ever seen him. This is right up there. And I think the doctor even said that they've witnessed him eating his paint as well. And there's quite an interesting dramatization of that done by Andy Serkis in the Simon Sharma art series. It's a BBC documentary where you see him he's just so miserable, and he's so distressed, and he's so overwhelmed by everything that he just starts feeding himself with his own paint. And if you think about it, his paint is like his only companion, and he's trying to get something more. Think about it, he's an artist, but he's trying to get something more out of the experience. He wants to taste it, he wants to feel it, he wants it to, in a way, is ingesting it almost in a way to become part of what he's doing. He doesn't want to be separated, right? And all of this just shows the terrible chaos that is enveloping him in this asylum, where he's actually very, very lonely, and also he's been sidelined at the time that this incredible World Fair is taking place in Paris. I mean, the Eiffel Tower was built just to showcase this World Fair, just the Eiffel Tower, and that tower remains to this day because people felt it was so iconic and so spectacular. And so he basically, while Gogh has left and gone on to better things, and he's selling his art, and his brother's getting married and going to have a child, his life is going down the tubes, and he's aware of it, right? And so he's really at his lowest ebb. He's really suffering and struggling, and not to find a point on it, he's unhappy. But something else is happening as well. It's not just depression. He's kind of losing consciousness. He's having attacks, and all of this is more susceptible to when his immunity is down, when his defenses are down to some extent as well. Chris Cavey, good to see you here as well. Okay, and then he goes on to say, my memory of these bad moments are vague, right? Now, what's interesting with this, and it definitely adds a level of intrigue to this, because you might say, for example, if Van Gogh if Van Gogh didn't cut off his ear, why wouldn't he just say that? Well, he might not remember, right? He may literally not know the answer himself, right? Have you thought about that? If he had some kind of episode during the ear incident, and he was acting in a deranged way, in a way that really scared the bejesus out of Gogh, then when this incident happened, he may have no memory of it. He may actually be ashamed to say, you know what, I don't actually remember. It's almost like when you're really, really drunk, you say, did we actually have sex? I'm embarrassed to say I don't even know the answer one way or another. And he seems to be saying the same thing. When this happens, I don't really know what's going on. Like, I'm not there anymore, right? Yeah, I think it is a kind of a fugue state. Well put. So he says, it seems to me there's something shady in it. It's quite an interesting comment. For this reason, I don't know what it will mean for my painting. I no longer see any possibility of having courage or hope. But after all, it wasn't just yesterday that we found this job of ours wasn't a cheerful one. So he definitely is not a happy camper, and is not afraid to say so. but he's also not wallowing in his misery. He's not self-pitiful. He's not like, oh, I don't want to live anymore. I want to give up. He's still trying. He's still fighting in a way, right? Um, and then it's not a really long letter. He also says, truly, it was a more sober attempt, matte in color without showing it in broken greens. And then he says, I felt a great desire to begin again with a palette as of the north. That's kind of another way of saying, I just felt in me that I want to paint with the same colors and style as I did when I was in the Netherlands, in my sort of home country. And I think what that is speaking to is a kind of nostalgia. It's a kind of longing that he was somewhere else, a kind of wishing for the past, wishing that he was just in a different situation, that he was a different person in different circumstances. And you might remember a scene from Lord of the Rings where one of the hobbits says, I wish none of this was happening. And Gandalf says, so does everyone. But we've got to decide what we're going to do with the time we still have. You guys know that scene. Anyway, he says, a good handshake to you and Joe, and naturally to Cora if he's still there. And now we go on to the next letter. And that takes us up to September. Now, I have wanted to cover letters he wrote in September, in our September, because I'm trying to take you along the same pacing of the timeline that he is in. It's easy to read through all the letters in one go, but when you do it with the same pace, I think you can appreciate, because of the amount of time passing, that there's this inexorable quality to it, that things are happening slowly and with gravitas and in an inevitable way. There's this inevitable train that is slowly heading to wherever it's going. That's a train on a track that is inevitably going where it's going. And and I often do this in true crime as well. When you do it chronologically, instead of just looking backwards and saying, "Oh yes, he said that. Oh yes, he said that." When you do it chronologically, it feels completely different. You can also feel the ebb and wash of motivation coming, motivation going, inspiration coming, inspiration going. And we saw how he painted Starry Night. Was it in the first week of June? Let me just confirm that. Should know this. June 1889. I'm just not sure what the exact date was of it, but I think he was basically in the asylum for 2 or 3 weeks, and he painted Starry Night. And if you think about it, Starry Night is a painting that changed art history. I've been to that painting in Manhattan, and just getting to it is an incredible journey. And I mean, I've been to the Van Gogh Museum in Amsterdam. I've been to Amsterdam, and it's an incredible journey for a painting to end up in another country, in like one of the most impressive citadels on the planet. And when you get into the room where the Starry Night is, it's like Taylor Swift has just entered the room. Like, everyone has their phones out, everyone is taking selfies with it. The room is packed. You try and have your couple of moments. I mean, I'm thinking, I've come all the way from South Africa to see this painting, and you kind of get the sense of you've only got about 5 seconds in front of it, and then your time's up, and you must get out the way and let the next person through. And it's just like, I've come all this way. I don't want to spend 5 seconds looking at a painting, but that's the level of pressure and all these people that want to just brush with this magic artwork. But the crazy thing is, at this point, Van Gogh is such a broken human being. And if you could travel through time and say, and almost like take him by the hand and say, this is what that painting you did that no one even knows about, it's gonna it's going to change the world. Well done, kind of thing, give him a pat on the back. You sort of feel like he actually really needs that right now, except it's impossible for him to know that or to be told that. He just isn't told that. In fact, when he does get some feedback, his brother's not very enthusiastic about it. So he kind of gets the sense, okay, I guess I'll try again, right? What I'm trying to get at is he doesn't know that he's achieved something really incredible, right? To the extent that you have articles like this written about it. Analysis reveals brilliant understanding of fluid dynamics, and this accurately depicts a scientific theory. And where's the other one? This one, right? It's like in the mainstream media of 2024, when the world is so changed and the world is so full of pictures and illustrations, and people are still caught up in this. And in other words, although he is through all appearances, he's this pathetic individual who has no money, no life, no friends, actually he's already achieved something seminal, something that very few people achieve in their entire life. And there's no acknowledgement, there's no validation, there's no credit, there's no, well, you've reached 1 million subscribers. Like, he's literally a YouTuber with 1 subscriber, and that's Theo, literally. Oh, Yvonne, that's really sad that you're missing this. But we'll see you when you come back. Well, you'll see me when you come back. Do you see what I'm getting at? That it's this incredible irony that his life is literally going down the toilet. He's eating dirt. He's feeling terrible. He's feeling deranged. Like, he's feeling like more of a nobody than he's ever felt. He's never felt more alone. And yet he's just achieved something absolutely incredible, but he doesn't actually know it. And there's a part of you that wishes, if only he did know it, if only he could see it, it would really help him. But we're not dealing with any old body here. Even when Van Gogh is a broken dude, he does still find a way to fight back, right? And that is what he does. The bottom line, though, is I think you'd be hard-pressed to find a moment in his life that is more at the bottom of the well than now. And so I guess another way of being explicit about what I'm trying to say is, if there was a time for him to take his own life, now would be it, right? It feels like he's going mad. He isn't allowed to paint. He's all alone, and he's earless. He's experienced the social death of being kicked out of the town of Hull. He spent so much personal time and effort investing in building and decorating and making the yellow house into this home, only to lose it. And so he doesn't even have a home. His home is a madhouse. So he's literally at the lowest ebb. And so if there was ever a time to say, you know what, life's really not worth living, I'm not gonna fight anymore, I'm done, well, now would be it. And guess what? Now is it? He is actually contemplating taking his life. Did you guys know that? Like, he is literally thinking, you know what? Things aren't really. I've fought a long fight. Things really aren't working out, right? And so that brings us to this letter from. Well, let's first deal with the letter from Vincent to Theo, and then another letter. Now, it's also quite, in a way, troubling that Theo takes so long to respond to this letter. I mean, Vincent is actually really in dire straits. He's really not in a good place. And it takes Theo about 2 weeks just to reply to this letter. Now, I wouldn't say that this letter to Theo is a a cry from the heart. He's not saying, please save me, please come visit me. But it's certainly saying, I'm eating dirt. If a family member of yours said, hi, I'm just calling to let you know things aren't going well and I've been eating dirt lately. When you want to respond pretty quickly and say, can I come over? You want to talk? What's going on? Right? So this is what he says in a bit of a belated way, right? He says the following. My dear Theo, I've been feeling better. Sorry, hang on. This isn't even a reply from Theo. It's a follow-up to Theo. I've been feeling better since I wrote you, and though I do not know if it will last, I do not want to wait any longer before writing you again. Thank you once more for the lovely etching after Rembrandt. Then he talks quite a lot about art, and think about what we're dealing with here. We're dealing with someone who has these episodes and he's feeling deranged, and yet he's capable between that of being completely sane, completely sensitive, completely coherent, right? It's not like he goes nuts and he goes down a slope and it's just like a slippery slope where he gathers momentum, right? He is kind of like on a roller coaster. There are moments where he can function and then he loses that functionality and it's terrifying, and then it comes back, and then he loses it again, but then it comes back. And so Yeri is come back and he says, yesterday I began to work a little, and he talks about that, and then he says, work distracts me infinitely better than anything else. So if you want a definition of what remedy does this dude need to regain his esteem and a sense of coherence, and to kind of get back on track, to get back on the horse, you need to let him paint. So in other words, when he's painting, things are going well. When he's writing letters, things are going well. When he's quiet and not painting, things aren't going well, right? So anyway, he goes on to say the following. Work distracts me infinitely better than anything else, and if I could once really throw myself into it with all my energy possible, that would be the best remedy. And so that's kind of what he's yearning for. He kind of just wants to throw himself into the maw of art and just roll with it and just be washed with it in a way. Art is kind of his life. It's kind of his mistress. And he kind of just wants to be invigorated with all of the things that go along with that. The inspiration, the passion, all of that intensity. And think about how he's a true artist in the sense that someone was telling me, I think it was my brother was telling me, and my brother's also an artist, was that Van Gogh didn't see, like if he saw a tree or a landscape, he didn't see that landscape the way we do, as a tree and a landscape and maybe textures or contrasts. He saw that landscape basically as color. Like where you see a tree, he would see that tree maybe as a red silhouette on whatever background, or a purple silhouette, and the surrounding fields not as those surrounding fields, but the sort of yellow tapestry, or almost liquid green, almost this neon green tapestry, right? He's seeing things in terms of color, this vivid color that's almost alive, right? And I can tell you as a writer that I've been in that place myself, where you're writing books and you're writing chapters, and you're coming up to the final chapters, and you can feel the momentum increasing, and eventually you can't eat or sleep or do anything else. It's almost like Stephen King describes it quite well, that you just innocently doing whatever, maybe eating your cereal, and the next thing a monster comes up behind you, picks you up by the scruff of your neck, throws you down in front of your desk and says, write me, right? In Van Gogh's case, paint me. And you almost feel like you are at the mercy of this passion, or whatever you want to call it, this thing that's going on. And in a way, it's a rush. I mean, you are kind of a vessel just transferring information in a way, and it's almost like automatic. You just there, and it's just flowing through you, right? And it's incredible experience. And once it's over, you kind of exhausted. I almost want to compare it to demon possession. It's like you are there and you're experiencing all these things, but it's almost like it's not you. Well, if it's not you, who is it? It actually is you, but it's you with your channels open, your creativity, channeling feelings, emotions, and everything. And what I think is quite dispiriting is you have this incredible experience. It's almost like watching an incredible movie or also reading some incredible book or having a love affair or something. And then you finish the whole thing and then nothing happens. Nobody notices. Someone maybe reads what you did, or in Van Gogh's case, sees what he did and goes, I don't really know what you're trying to do here. And you're like, geez, but didn't I feel something? Right. And someone saying, this is terrible. There's just so many typos. And you're like, wow, I experienced that a little bit differently. And it's obviously extremely disappointing that your audience has that response, but you can't do anything about it. And then you wonder, well, okay, maybe I was high on bad pizza or something, right? Like Jerry Maguire. I'm just trying to communicate the thrill, that creative thrill that an artist and an author can experience. And I would say good artists and good authors have that and bad ones don't. And what I mean is, if you can sit down and you've got to think out every word, and it's dry, kind of mechanical process, then I don't know if you're really feeling it. I don't know if there's really any creative zest going into it. And I would say, I don't know if it's got any value. But anyway, let's go back to his letter. So he talks about, if I could once really throw myself into it with all my energy possible, that would be the best remedy. And guess what he does less than a year from now? He does exactly that. Like, he's already going into, I mean, where are we now? It's sort of fall. Things are starting to cool down in the northern hemisphere. The fields are starting to change color. The seasons are changing. And so as that whole wheel turns and it comes back to summer, when summer returns, that's going to be his final summer in France. And that is when he's going to do exactly that. He's going to throw himself into painting with all his energy, and he's going to paint 70 pictures in 70 days. And it really is going to be this kind of explosion of energy. That's what he wants to do. That's what he did do, right? Let's just see. So he says, if I could once really throw myself into it with all my energy possibly, that would be the best remedy. Let's see if... Okay, well, it seems like YouTube doesn't want to publish that. Okay, so, and then he talks about the impossibility of getting models, and a lot of other things prevent me from doing it. Altogether, I really must try to take things a little passively and have patience. So he's also got the self-awareness to say, you know what, maybe I need to calm down. Maybe I need to be less excited. Maybe I need to slow down and just recover, right? And I'm trying to remember, I think it was also Andy Serkis who narrated some of these Van Gogh letters where he says over and over again, he says, I'm trying to recover. I'm trying to recover. And I remember when I was in a hotel in Long Island and I had COVID, um, and I wanted to continue. I was traveling through America, and I wanted to continue traveling through America. You're trying to will yourself to recover. I mean, you don't want to be sick. You don't want what is happening to you to happen to you, and you're trying to kind of muster whatever the forces are that are part of one's immunity and part of a recovery. But of course, I don't really know if it has really that much to do, in certain cases, with your will. Um, Certainly, certain fights of disease do have something to do with that, but there's a certain um, evolution of disease that's got to run its course, no matter how you feel. You might say, you know what, I feel strong, I'm going to fight this. Well, no matter how you feel, it's going to go you know, take the route that it's going to take. But you can just sense that strong will of him saying, I'm trying to recover, I'm trying, and it's almost like this person, who he is, has been ground down to like that kernel. That's all that's left of him. The entirety of a person has been ground down to a kernel, like a little kernel of himself, right? And what is he going to do with that? What they say in the Bible. If you have faith if you have faith the size of a mustard seed, you can move mountains. Well, if you have that amount of wherewithal, right, the size of a kernel, you can paint Starry Night. You can do anything as long as it's just not ground down to dust and to nothing. As long as there's something there, it's a seed that can lead to something else. And I think that's quite a good point to bring up something else. I want to talk briefly just about the incredible power of nature to rejuvenate itself. And I experienced this in a very direct way with this plant. It's called a delicious monster. And I want to quickly show you guys this, if you don't mind. Just do that. It's not really the picture that I'm looking for. So can you see on screen, that's a delicious monster. And this plant had been completely wiped out. I left it out in the frost, and all those beautiful leaves got totally destroyed. And you can see it starting to sprout new leaves. And this took about maybe 2 weeks. There's one coming out there, there's one over there, there's one there, there's one there, right? And I was actually quite tempted to throw this plant out because I thought it was dead. I mean, all the leaves were completely dead. And then it came alive. There you get a better idea of just how it's been destroyed. I mean, I've actually clipped off those leaves that have died, right? So you can just see it. I was very close to throwing this plant out, just saying, look, it's died. But then you look more closely and you see these little buds coming out, right? And one of the reasons I was tempted to throw it out was how this plant typically, when it's thriving and when it's happy, how it creates a new leaf is from the old leaf, from the original leaf, it sprouts a new leaf, and that's how it grows. But all of the original leaves had died. I didn't actually know that it was capable of generating a new leaf out of the stem just like that, right? And so, as Robbie Robbins says, plants are amazing, but so are people. You look at this and you say, if a plant can come back from the dead, essentially, can a person? And I know for a fact, someone who was in chat now, yeah, um, had a very awful experience I'm not going to say too much more than that, but it's similar to what we're seeing with this plant, right? And I think that's very encouraging, is that it does happen in life. You can have devastating things happen, like the frost to this plant, and yet you can come back and live the rest of your life. And you can even come back where, in a way, if enough time passes, you might say, I would never have thought that at one point you lost all your leaves and you were at death's door. Wow, I would never even have imagined that. That's how much you can recover, right? Here's another picture. I'm a little bit sorry I don't have even the older pictures where it just is really badly devastated. But there you can see a little bit. You can see it starting to come out there, and come out there, and come out there, right? And so literally what happened was I left this plant out, and we had an unusually brutal winter, unusually cold winter. Today is actually also very cold. There's actually been, in South Africa, we don't have blizzards where people get caught in the snow. And for the first time that has happened, people were traveling somewhere. There was this blizzard, and people were like, wow, this is, so people were stuck in the snow wearing flip flops because it's not something that ever happens here. So the weather's also changing here. But I wish I had the even older pictures of this delicious monster where it really looks like a carcass. It's just really black leaves. And, you really wouldn't think that there was much hope at all. And now I want to show you just where it is now, like how far this plant has come along. This is kind of what it's starting to look like closer to the present. Look at that. And it is pacing itself. It knows to not grow the leaves that it's putting out too big. It's got to be a manageable process, kind of modest. You need to start modestly. Look how all of these pieces are coming out there. Look how long this stalk is, there as well, there as well. And this is a plant that, as I say, I left outside. It was pretty much killed by the frost, and all I did was I brought it inside and I started watering it. I brought it inside, I cut off the dead parts of it, and then just watered it, and obviously opened the curtains so it would get light, and it's made a comeback, right? And you kind of almost want to wonder, wasn't there a moment in this plant's organismic experience where it felt, that's it for me. I think I'm just going to die. I'm not gonna try and dig into this soil. It's over. It's not even the middle of winter, and I'm cooked. I'm done. You sort of wonder whether there's a part of the plant that's just like, okay, that was a shock. That's too much for me. Okay, I give up. Right. Okay, now I want to show you. I think I've got another picture. There you also get a nice sort of view of what I'm talking about. And again, that's why I say, you've got to look at it chronologically. Big things have small beginnings. Recovery starts small, modestly, slowly, and you've got to exercise patience and pacing, right? And that's what Van Gogh needs to do here as well. And so now these are some of the very last photos I've taken of this delicious monster. So you can see how big these leaves have already gotten. This is all within the same season. And you can see how it's already, it's at this point growing so quickly. It's already made leaves coming out of these leaves. Leaves coming out of. There's a leaf there coming out of that leaf. There's a leaf there coming out of that one. So although it started very, very slowly, it's definitely picked up the pace. I think I can. There's another one. So can you see how there that leaf is coming out of there? Um, can you see how this leaf is coming out of basically that one? Anyway, I'm looking forward to showing you guys the plant when it's back to where it was. And I wouldn't be surprised if it takes maybe another year, maybe slightly longer, but it is really amazing, um, nature's capacity to rejuvenate. And we are actually part of nature. Sometimes we don't like to think that, but actually we are. And the advantages to connecting with nature and the disadvantages. The advantage is when you have the humility to say, nature also has setbacks, nature also has seasons, you know. Well, we also, as human beings, we have human nature, and we also plugged into nature in a certain way. I think we have a tendency to think of ourselves almost as gods or immortal. We don't like to think that we are vulnerable, but that's a bit of an illusion. We are. But there's definitely so much inspiration one can take out of nature. And with that being said, let's get back to Van Gogh letters, right? So he says, I think very often of the other fellows in Brittany who are certainly busy doing better work than I. So he can't help think about compare himself to the other artists out there that are going strong. And of course, if you want to make yourself miserable, compare yourself unfavorably to others. There's always going to be someone more successful than what you are. And by the same token, and think about this delicious monster, if that plant is sort of looking out the window, and I know this sounds a little bit silly, but that plant is looking out the window saying, look how what a nice life those plants have out there. I've just lost everything. Well, I think I'm going to give up. It's not fair, they didn't have that and I had that. If you, in order to recover, in order to muster what you need to recover, you need to focus on yourself. If you don't have a lot of energy and you've really broken down, you shouldn't have enough energy, and you shouldn't um, distract or water down, or what's the word that I'm looking for? To um, You don't want to dilute that little bit of energy you've got onto other people that you've got no control over and no influence over. You do have control over yourself. You do have influence over yourself. So use that little bit of that kernel that you got left, that kernel of energy and that kernel of focus. Use it on yourself. And from there, you've got everything you need to regenerate. Quite an incredible thought, right? Okay. So he goes on to say, if it were possible for me to start again with the experience I have now, I should not go to see the South. So he's kind of having regrets as well. I wish I didn't do that. If I could do this over again, I would do that. Now, again, using the analogy of the delicious monster, think about you've lost everything. You've lost all of your instruments for nourishment, right? You're back to square one. You're just a couple of roots and a few little stems, right? That plant has got to start all over again, start building everything that it has created. It went to all the trouble to make itself what it was, and then the cold came and just burned it away. Now it's got to start all over again. Do you want to complain about that? Do you want to compare yourself, or do you want to just say, you know what, this is kind of an emergency situation. I don't have a lot of time. I don't have a lot of energy. Things are kind of fragile at the moment. I'm going to take the little bit of energy I have and just focus on what I can do every day. I'm going to just summon what I can. I'm going to dig deep, excuse the pun. I'm going to dig deep, and I'm just going to do what I can do. I can't do more than that. I'm not going to focus on that over there or that over there. I'm just going to focus on what I can do. That's all. And from there you can build and build and build. And so what I want to compare this to is Van Gogh paints Starry Night, and within a very short time, let's say June, July, August, September, within about 3 months, he is a very broken individual who feels like he's got to start all over again. Yari's saying it, right? Right? And it feels like his life is just imploding. It feels like he's losing his mind. He doesn't have any status in society. It feels like he's lost everything, right? And so where he is, the place that he is at this point is incredibly fragile, because he could just as well say, I give up. Or he could just as well say, I'm not going to be an artist anymore. It's just too hard. Or we could just as well say, whatever, I'm going to start drinking, or I'm going to do this, or I'm going to do that, right? What he ultimately does, and this is the part that we're at now. So from here, we're going to get to it in the next letter. He goes from his lowest ebb, and within a year, he paints the portrait of Dr. Gachet, which will sell in May 1990 for $190 million. This person who's like that plant you've just seen, totally destroyed, right? Totally kind of withered away. There's like virtually nothing left of it. Within barely a year, he comes back and he paints a painting that becomes, in its time, the most valuable painting ever sold, right? At the time that the portrait of Dr. Gachet sold, it was a world record. No painting had ever been valued that much. And this painting that I'm talking about was painted October, November, December, January, February, March, April, May, June, around about 9 months from this point, 9 months later. And of course, he doesn't know that. He feels it. He feels like, I want to do this. I want to do that. I wish I had the energy. But at the same time, is feeling, look at what other people are doing. Look at how much I've lost. And so the lesson here is focus on what you can do. There's nothing more that you can do other than that, right? Okay. So he goes on to say, were I free and independent, I should nevertheless have kept my enthusiasm, because there are some beautiful things to be done. And you can imagine the delicious monster thinking as well, well, I'm so destroyed, I've lost so much, but somehow I think, somehow I imagine there are beautiful things to be done. What if I could come back? And then he says, the vineyards, for instance, and the fields of olives, if I had the confidence in the management of this place, nothing would be better or simpler than to bring all my furniture here. Right? If I get better, or in the intervals, I could sooner or later go back to Paris or Brittany. Right? He's trying to recover. He says, first of all, it's very expensive here, and now I'm afraid of the other patients. That's also quite a big statement he's making. He's actually living in fear. You know, there are people around him that are genuinely deranged, right? And so he says, perhaps I exaggerate in the misery of my having been bowled over by my illness again, but I'm sort of afraid. It's another quite big statement. I'm sort of afraid. I don't know what's happening. I'm afraid of my own mind. You will say, as I say to myself too, that the fault must be within me and not in the circumstances or in other people. Anyway, it is not pleasant. And what's incredible is how resilient he is despite how shitty his circumstances are. I mean, he's basically saying, I don't blame other people. He's saying, I'm not. He's not moaning about any particular madman. and he's saying, I'm not going to blame circumstances. Maybe if I find a fault within myself, maybe I can fix something in me, and that is exactly the right attitude. Of course, there's only so much you can do when you're ill. I mean, an illness must work its way through, and some things are, even if it's in your body, it's not necessarily under your control. But as soon as you say, let me bring myself back into the picture. As soon as you say, this is my fault, even if it's not, the fault must be within me, even if it's not. Um, the way to fix this is by fixing me, even if it's not. As soon as you do that, you are taking power back into your situation. Because as soon as you do the opposite and say, you to blame, that's to blame, the problem is this or that or the next thing, as soon as you do that, and you might be 100% right, someone else might be to blame. The problem might be this or that situation. But as soon as you kind of say, what can I do? What can I change? How can I react? How can I act? What action do I need to take? That's when you're going to find power and influence and agency over your situation. As soon as you say, I blame you, or I blame that, or I blame that, even if you're 100% right, you're giving away that power, right? And so it may not seem fair to blame yourself. And I'm not saying blame yourself in a negative way. I say, is as Robbie Robbins says, take responsibility, right? Put the focus on yourself and say, what can I do? Not what should you do, or what could somebody else do, or can someone do this or that for me? What can I do? And that's exactly why Van Gogh ends up painting the portrait of Dr. Gachet, because he's in this terrible state that he's in, where and you're going to see it in a moment, where he's not sure if he wants to live anymore, is nevertheless able to say, without being self-pitying or over-dramatic, what if I can deal with the fault that's in myself? What if I can build myself up? Okay, what if I can? How can I? Well, find the answer. So he says, it's not pleasant. Then he says, Monsieur Peyron has been kind to me and he has much experience. I do not doubt that he speaks and judges correctly. But has he come to any conclusion? Has he written to you anything definite and possible? So it seems like he's wondering, what is the doctor saying about me? What is going on? Has he told you? Right? Then he says, you see that I am in a very bad humor. Things aren't going well. Again, it's not like he's incapable of saying what he's going through. He's just not melodramatic about it, right? He's not blaming the doctor. He's not blaming Theo, but he is saying things aren't going well. Guess what? Things aren't going well. He says, then I feel like a fool going and asking doctors permission to make pictures. Besides, it is to be hoped that if sooner or later I can get a certain amount better, it will soon be because I've recovered through working, right? So there is that is his formula for recovery, is work. Is saying, you know what, I don't need a girlfriend, I don't need money, I don't need alcohol, I don't need 3 square meals a day, I don't need a softer bed. I think what I need is just to be able to work the way that I like to. For it is a thing which strengthens the will and consequently leaves these mental weaknesses less hold. And if you think about it, just in a very classical way, people who retire often die not long afterwards. People who go into retirement, they don't live much longer after that. And an argument could be made that it's because they feel they've got nothing to live for. that they feel they are useless. Now, I'm not saying that they have nothing to live for, and I'm not saying that they're useless. I'm saying if you feel you have nothing to live for, or if you feel you're useless like this delicious monster, then that can be deadly. That kind of self-perception can be absolutely deadly, irrespective of all the other things going on. Because in a weird way, you're probably allowing the negative things in the world to infect you, where you say, I blame that for the fact that I'm this. I blame this politician and that experience and that trauma and this person and that situation for who I am today. Instead of saying, I can reinvent my identity today if I want to. And how can I invent it that, or how can I cobble it together in a way that suits the situation and the person I need to be in the world the way it is right now? That's a totally different response. The one is maladaptive, the other one is adaptive. And then he says, um, in other words, to not allow mental weakness a hold, work keeps you occupied, it keeps you thinking, it keeps you problem solving in a way, right? Keeps you functional. Then he says, my dear brother, I wanted to write better than this, but things aren't going very well. There he says it again. I will get great pleasure from going into the mountains to paint the whole day. I hope they will let me do it one of these days. And so even the doctors are saying, you know what, we can't really let you paint. You're not in a state to do that. Look at that. It's another way of saying, well, when you're in this situation, what makes you happy? You could ask the delicious monster, what makes you happy? Well, a little bit of sunshine. Give me a little bit of sunshine. Just I'll be happy with that. Just give me a little bit of sun. Okay. What makes him happy? I just want to go into the mountains to paint. That's all I need. He says, I hope they will let me do it one of these days. And so what's actually happening is they're not letting him do it at this point. You will soon see a canvas of a hovel in the mountains, which I did under the influence of that book of rods. So it's this picture. It would be good for me to stay at a farm for a time at least. I might do good work there. And so when he goes to Ovez, and I've been to Ovez, it very much does have a farmyard feel to it. I mean, the wheat fields, no matter where you are along Ovez, because it's like the way the town is laid out is kind of like strands of spaghetti along a river, and then if you just go over the ridge, well, there are fields of wheat. Then he says, I must write to Mother and Will one of these days. What do you say to Mother's going to live in Leiden? I think she's right in that I understand how she hankers after her grandchildren, and then there will hardly be any of us left in Brabant. Speaking of that, not very long ago, I read in I forget which book by Henry Conscience. His peasants are dreadfully sentimental, if you like. But speaking of Impressionism, do you know that there are descriptions of landscapes in it with notes of color, of a truth, an experience, and a primitiveness of the first rank? And it is always like that. Oh, my dear brother, that heath down there is in the Campine, was something after all. But there it will not come again, so let's go on. I find it incredible that in the midst of this misery, he is so eloquent, that he can think and talk in such a crystal clear way, even when he's at his worst. And I feel the same thing about Virginia Woolf. I mean, Virginia Woolf wrote a note and then walked into the river Oise, I think. And she's so succinct in this note where she says, I can't express myself anymore. That's how high her standards were. And she didn't want to live if she couldn't say exactly what she wanted to say to the highest sort of standard, right? Anyway, he goes on to write, He, Conscience, described a brand new little house with a roof of red tiles full in the sunshine, a garden with dock and onions, potatoes with their dull green, a beech hedge, a vineyard, and further on some pines, the heather all yellow. Don't be afraid, it was not a Casine, it was a Claude Monet. Then there is some originality, even in the excess of sentimentality. And I, who feel that can do nothing, isn't it maddening? If you happen to have an opportunity to get lithographs after Delacroix, Rousseau, Diaz, etc., past or present artists, Galeries Modernes, etc., I cannot advise you too strongly to hold on to them because you'll see they will become rare. It was, however, just the way to find things popular, those old fine prints, those old prints at 1 franc, those etchings, etc., of those days. The pamphlet on Rodin and Claude Monet, very interesting. Does this seem like a deranged person is writing this? He's writing all of this from memory, right? Very interesting. I'd have liked to see that. It's no use saying that, nevertheless, I don't agree with him when he says that Meissonier is no good and that the Rousseaus are of great interest for those who like them and want to know what the artist was feeling. It's impossible that everyone should be of this opinion, because for that one must have seen and looked at them, and that is not as common as blackberries. Now, if you looked at a Meissonier for a year, there would still be something in it to look at next year. You may be sure of that. Not to mention his lucky days when he had perfect flashes of genius. Certainly, I know that Daumier, Millet, and Delacroix have a different style of drawing, but Meissonier's workmanship, that's something essentially French, above all, when the old Dutchman would have found nothing to quarrel with in it, and yet it is different from them and modern. One must be blind to think that Messonnier is not an artist, and a first rate one. Have many things been done which give the 19th century note better than the portrait of Hetzel? When Bernard did those two fine panels, Primitive Man and Modern Man, which we saw at Betty's, when he made the modern man a reader, he had the same idea. And again, doesn't he just seem so sensible? And I shall always regret that in our day, people believe that the generation of, say, 48 and the present one are incompatible. I think that the two nevertheless belong to each other, though I cannot prove it. See, take old Bodmer. Wasn't he able to study nature as a hunter and as a woodsman? Didn't he love it and know it from the experience of a long life, virile and complete? And do you think that any chance Parisian who goes to the suburbs knows as much or more about it because he does a landscape in cruder tones? Not that there's any harm in using pure and jarring tones. Excuse me, not that I'm always an admirer of Bodmer from the point of view of color, but I admire and love the man who knew the whole forest of Fontainebleau, from the insect to the wild boar, and from the stag to the lark, from the great oak and the rock mass to the fern and the blade of grass. You know, if Van Gogh is anything, he's a naturalist, is someone who really feels the rush of life, the rush of nature through him. Now, a thing like that is not felt or even found by chance, by any chance comer. It's quite a long letter. And Brion, oh, a maker of Alsatian type pictures, people would tell me. Very good. He, as a matter of fact, he has, as a matter of fact, done the betrothal feast, the Protestant marriage, etc., which are indeed Alsatian. Let's see if we can pick that up. The betrothal feast by Brion. Chris Cavey, thanks so much for joining us. Thanks for being here. Brion, that's the one. I think it's this. Maybe not. I'm looking at this, but I don't know if that's what it is. Um, Jan van Eyck. That's not what I'm looking for. Um, can't seem to find it. Let's try Protestant marriage. Is this it? Okay, I think I found it. So this is, let's just bring that up. So Gustave Briand was a French painter and illustrator. He was born in Rothau in the department of Bas-Rhin in 1824. So he died about 12 years before these letters were written. This is him over here. And these are the kind of uh, drawings and paintings and illustrations that are now registering with Van Gogh that he did. Procession in Strasbourg, 1873. It does have a kind of fairy tale, but also photographic quality, doesn't it? The Pilgrims of Santa Odile. And that's all that I can find of this artist. Anyway, at least it gives us an idea. Then he says, however, when no one could be found equal to illustrating Les Miserables, he did it in a way not yet surpassed, and he made no blunders about his characters. Is it a little thing to know people so well and the humanity of that period so well that you hardly ever make a mistake in an expression or in a character? It's quite interesting turn of phrase there. You know people so well that you are able to paint them without any mistakes. As for us, we have to grow old in hard work, and that is why we eat our hearts out when things don't go well. I think that if one day you see the Brias Gallery at Montpellier, I think that then nothing will move you more than Brias himself when you realize from his purchases what he tried to be to artists. It is rather disheartening when you see some portraits of him. His face is so heartbroken and obviously frustrated. So can you see? He's not just thinking of himself. He's really so caught up in art that he's just thinking about other artists and their lot in life. He says if one doesn't make a success of it in the South, there's always the thought of that man who suffered all his life for the same cause. The only serene portraits are the Delacroix and the Ricards. By pure chance, the one by Cabanel, for instance, is true and very interesting in its keenness of observation. At least it gives an idea of the man. I'm glad that Joe's mother has come to Paris, excuse me. Next year it will be a little different perhaps, and you will have a child, and that will bring a fair amount of the little worries of human life. But as some great worries of spleen, etc., will disappear forever, it is certainly the way things should go. I will write again. I'm not writing to you as I should have liked. So, he's kind of saying, I'm not quite myself. I can't quite express what I mean to say. I hope that all is well at your home and you will continue to be well. I'm very glad that Brevet has rid you of your cough. So even Theo is not completely healthy. It worried me somewhat too. The trouble I had in my throat is beginning to disappear. I still eat with some difficulty, but after all, it has got better. So, he's not so preoccupied with himself. He's not so self centered that he can't think that his own brothers also had health problems and he asks him about it. He says, that worried me as well. A good handshake for you and Joe, ever yours, Vincent. And now we come to the letter that this video is named after. And the incredible thing is it's written about the same time as this letter. Dear sir, I add a few words to your brother's letter to inform you that he is quite recovered from his crisis, that he has completely regained his lucidity of mind, and that he has resumed painting just as he used to do. And there it is. So there's confirmation that he has been thinking about taking his life. And he says, the doctor says, only disturbing dreams remain, but they tend to disappear too, and their intensity is less great. Now, I do think one of the um, biggest challenges for someone who is so depressed or broken is to see the whole world and the whole universe and their whole circumstance as real and immutable in that moment. You know what I mean? So, if we take the analogy of the delicious monster, if that plant could talk and it said, I am destroyed, right? If it said, at this moment in time, there's almost nothing left of me, I've lost everything, none of that wouldn't be true. All of that would be sensible and common sense and accurate, right? And so, one of the ways out of that impasse where you say, I'm really convicted by reality, like reality is showing me a devastating portrait of myself and it's inescapable. Yeah, but it's inescapable in this moment in time. Where did you come from? Where could you still go from this point onwards? And so the being trapped in that moment in time is part of the problem, but it's also part of the solution, is where you say, I'm not trapped in this moment in time. This moment in time is my opportunity to take responsibility. Am I going to run away from, try to run away to some fairy tale that takes me away from this intolerable situation, this unendurable experience, right? Am I going to try and avoid it? Am I going to try and run away from it? Am I going to try and escape it? Right? And it's completely understandable to feel that way, that you want to do all those things, because it's it's a very horrible place to be. But of course, you aren't going to be in that place forever, right? In other words, the sun's going to go up and down. There'll be another day, and maybe things won't have changed much by then. But the sun will go up and down again and again and again. And after that, things will have changed a little bit. And after another period like that, things will have changed more. And so things change. And that's the ebb and flow of the world, right? What I'm trying to say is that same thing that can be your cage can also be the thing that sets you free, where you say, this situation that is so horrible, if I can actually take it on the chin and say, yeah, that is what's going on. What can I do with it? Right? That is the beginning of taking control. You know, when is the best place to take control of your life? But at the beginning, or at the end of something, at the beginning of something else. Deborah, take care. Take care. Thanks for joining us. Thanks a lot for that. That's from Deborah in Australia. But what I'm trying to impress upon you guys is, so he was having these thoughts, no question. And what I'm also trying to impress on you is, it kind of makes sense that he would be very devastated around about 9 months after he lost his ear. So in other words, it's taken about 9 months really for the full devastation of that experience to kind of take root. It's not only that that's taking place. It's not like he lost his home, he got kicked out of the town, he's lost his reputation, things aren't going so well. that's not all of it. The other part of it is in a way losing his marbles. He is in a way dealing with an additional difficulty, which is probably extremely stressful under those circumstances. Think about it. If you were in your own home and you were having episodes where you were losing consciousness, it would be extremely stressful. But there'd be something, there'd be something more stressful than that, is if you lost your home and now you're having these episodes and you're not even in your own home, and someone else is also going to pay for your board and lodging. You're already going to feel adrift. You're going to feel extremely vulnerable, right? It's a little bit like me. Instead of bringing that delicious monster inside, I simply put it somewhere else, and maybe the weather conditions are going to be better there, maybe not. I'm not intentionally changing it or trying to take care of it. And so, in a weird way, Van Gogh going into the asylum is a kind of random change that could help him, and maybe it's not going to help him, right? If certain things don't go a certain way, and if he doesn't adapt, and if he doesn't pick himself up, that could be a really horrible environment. And think about this. I'm not kidding when I say this. Think about this. If you go 3 or 4 or 5 weeks or even a couple of months earlier and you say, are you sure this is the best thing for this artist? Because he's about to paint Starry Night, and then a couple of months later, if he survives, he's going to paint this other painting. Are you sure you want to put him in this asylum? Because we also know that just prior to September, he's going to go through a period where he's not going to want to live. And what if the idiots around him bring him down? What if that takes hold, right? In other words, imagine if you could play God with this man's life, and you had a little bit of a knowledge of predestination and a knowledge of the future, maybe not a year in advance, just a couple of months. And you said, okay, so 3 weeks from now he's going to paint Starry Night, but 3 months later he's not going to want to live anymore. Is this really the right environment for this artist that's capable of so much? Do we really want to put him in this asylum, which is essentially in harm's way? Like, is this going to be good for his mental health? It's very hard to think that way. Are you guys following the thought experiment aspect to what I'm saying? Does it make sense? Anyway, the bottom line is, in the asylum, he does find himself at a very, very low point. I don't think you can dispute that based on what I've highlighted in this letter. I don't think if it's something that is thought about somewhere else, it's not very easy to find. This is one of the few explicit references to him apparently wanting to possibly give up. And when does it happen? When he's not allowed to paint. When he's not writing any letters, that's when it happens. In other words, when he's lonely and he has nothing to do and he feels like he's got nothing to live for. And then from the letter we've just read, which was sent the same time as this letter, he obviously comes out of it, right? He's obviously come out the other side. And he said things like, what if the fault lies with us? And I do have to wonder, would Dr. Peyron have read his letter? Because he knew about it. He said, I add a few words to your brother's letter. Did he read Vincent's letter? I wonder. Anyway, he says, only disturbing dreams remain, but they tend to disappear too, and the intensity is less great. His appetite has returned, and he has resumed his usual mode of life. With my best compliments, Dr. Peyron. And so now you can only imagine getting a letter like this, right? What does Theo say? And so we go from the 3rd or 4th of September to the 5th or 6th of September. And again, it's another letter from Vincent to Theo. Theo is really preoccupied with something. Something's going on with Theo that Theo's not really in a position to respond, which is bizarre. My dear brother, I've already written to you, but there are still quite a few things you said to me that I haven't answered yet. Firstly, you have rented a room in Tanguy's house and that my canvases are there, which is very interesting, provided you aren't paying too much for it. You see what is preoccupying him all along through all of this trauma and all of this difficulty. His focus is on art, and that is kind of helping him. It's something to focus on besides his own misery. Be it as it may, I'm sure it is a very good step, and I thank you for taking it. As for so many other things, it is curious that Maus had the idea of inviting young Bernard and me for the next Vinctist exhibition. I should like to exhibit with them very much, though I'm conscious of my inferiority by the side of so many tremendously talented Belgians. This Mellery now is a great artist and has been one for a number of years, but I shall try my best to do something good this autumn. I'm working away in my room without interruption, which does me good and chases away what I imagine are abnormal ideas. Aloha, Iceland. Good to see you here. I see you having a rip roaring time with your family, enjoying the last bits of family where you are. Some nice pictures there. Um, so he goes on to say, thus I've done the painting of the bedroom once more. That's certainly one of my best studies, and sooner or later it must definitely be relined. It is painted so quickly and is dried in such a way that the turpentine evaporated straight away, and the paint hasn't stuck firmly to the canvas at all. That will also have happened with other studies of mine, painted very quickly and with a very full brush. Anyway, after some time, this thin canvas deteriorates and cannot take a lot of impasto. That's when you paint kind of in that thick style. You can see it above the picture of me and below, right? That's impasto. Um, Let me just remove myself, and you can see what I'm talking about. Okay. Anyway, I'm talking about around me, the picture of me here. Anyway, it says, they say, and I'm very willing to believe it, that it is difficult to know oneself, but it isn't easy to paint oneself either. Some pretty profound words there. Have you ever tried to paint a self portrait of yourself? So I'm working on two self portraits at the moment for want of another model. Because it is high time I did a little figure work. In the one I began the first day I got up, I was thin and deathly pale. It is dark purple blue and the head whitish with yellow hair, thus with a color effect. So um, he comes out of this terrible place and he starts painting self portraits. Isn't that a wonderful, constructive start to self awareness, looking at himself, looking into himself at this point in his life? And so he paints this picture, and it's pretty much all blue, right? So have a look at that. It's pretty much all blue with a bit of contrast with the ginger beard. See if I can get a better version of this, because this site never really does Van Gogh self-portraits. Now, how did Google know that I was looking for that one? I mean, look at that. I just put in Van Gogh self-portrait and look at the one that came up. How did Google know? Pretty weird, eh? Um, So that's a slightly better version of it. Can you see any kind of anguish in his eyes? Like, is he communicating any kind of real anguish there? What do you guys think? And then after this one, he paints another one. He says, I've since started another three-quarter profile on a light background. And I have to say, I think this is my favorite. Um, well, I don't know if it's my favorite. I think it's probably that's my second most favorite Van Gogh self-portrait. It's interesting how everything is the same color. It's almost like he is indistinguishable from the air and the wall and the surround and the surroundings, right? It's almost like the air is vibrating and it's sort of affecting him. That there's not much difference between the reality of himself and his thoughts and what's around him. But what is interesting with both pictures are, they both have just the same color throughout. Look at that one and look at this one. Basically, what's happening is it goes from dark blue to light blue. It's almost like it's just gotten a little bit less intense. That whatever his mood is, it's just gone from throbbing dark blue to a bristling light blue. I'm just saying it's quite interesting how there's nothing going on. There's no difference in the color. It's like everything is the same color except his face. Well, even his clothing is the same color as the space around him. So it's almost like he feels like he's losing his identity or he's losing his place in the world, like he's being washed away. Do you think he's trying to communicate that? Um, then I'm retouching the summer studies. In fact, I'm working morning, noon, and night. Are you well? Damn it, I really wish you were 2 years further on and that these early days of your marriage, however lovely they may be, at times were behind you. I'm quite convinced that the marriage grows better with time. So, can you see he's aware that Theo's probably not writing to him because Theo's caught up in his own marriage. His wife's pregnant and he's got to tend to her. He's realistic. He's not like, why aren't you writing to me? You're betraying me. You're letting me down when I really need you. There's none of that. He kind of understands that Theo is distracted by his marriage. He says, take things with a pinch of northern equanimity. It's a little bit like Patsy Ramsey saying something about southern common sense. Theo, take things with a pinch of northern equanimity and look after yourselves, both of you. This confounded life in the world of art is exhausting, it seems. Day by day, my strength is returning, and already I feel I have almost too much of it again. For one doesn't need to be a Hercules to remain hard at work at the easel. What you told me about Mouse having been to see my canvases made me think a lot about the Belgian painters these last few days and also during my illness. As a result, and there he says, I was overwhelmed with memories as an avalanche. Remember what I said about um, is he feeling nostalgia? And there he says it. Thanks, Valentine. Um, yeah, Chelsea says he's part of his surroundings. Do you think he's part of his surroundings in a good way, given that he's in an asylum? Like, it's one thing if you walking through a forest or on a beach or through a beautiful citadel, or park or something, and you're part of your surroundings. If you're part of your surroundings and your surroundings are a madhouse, is that something you want to be part of? Um, so he says, I tried to recall the whole of that school of modern Flemish artists until I felt as homesick as a fish out of water. So there it is. He is feeling like he is missing home. I remember when I was in the Air Force, there were times when I really missed just being at home, just the regular things of home, the lounge, the kind of breakfast that you'd have, the lawn. I remember being extremely homesick when I was in the Air Force. And it's often when I think you're very stressed and struggling to cope in a way that you do become homesick. I've also felt that when I was in South Korea, especially I think in my fourth year, you start to yearn for the most simple things, certain foods, certain obscure places, certain obscure people and experiences. Anyway, that's what he's talking about here. So he says, which isn't any good because our way lies forwards and retracing our steps is both impossible and impermissible. And so that is his attitude. I can't do anything except go forward. It's a good attitude to take. In other words, one can think about the past without being swamped by an over melancholic nostalgia. But I must say, I seem to be on his wavelength because he's now just used the word that I've thought is appropriate here. So he's saying, you know what, you can think about the past, but don't dwell on it. So yeah, you've got him kind of giving advice, right? Anyway, Henry Conscience may not be a perfect writer by any means, but no two ways about it. What a painter, and what human kindness in what he said and hoped for. There's a preface in one of his books on my mind all the time, where he writes that he had been very ill and says that during his illness, despite all his efforts, he felt his affection for mankind draining away. But that his feeling of love returned on long walks in the countryside. It's quite profound. The inevitability of suffering and despair, well, here I am, bucked up again for a while, and I thank him for it. I'm writing, so it seems like he got some of his wherewithal, some of his chutzpah, right? Some of his vim and vigor by reading, and by reading this particular writer. He says, there's a preface in one of his books on my mind all the time. And it's regarding this statement. And so this is obviously really resonating with him, that he actually felt his affection for people dissipating, but that it also kind of washed back like a tide when he would take long walks in the countryside. And he thought, wow, I'm not the only one that's lost a bit of faith in mankind. And look, it can come back. When you've lost it, can actually come back. Anyway, he goes on to say, I'm writing you this letter bit by bit in the intervals when I'm worn out with painting. The work is going pretty well. I'm struggling with a canvas I started a few days before my illness, a Reaper. So it's this one. It's not the best copy of it. Let's see if we can get a better one. It's got a very weird sky, I must say. Well, there's another version of it. I find that pretty terribly executed. I like everything else. I don't really like that. Just seems pretty clumsy. Especially if you look at the other picture I showed you of that other artist. What's his name? Brony. Um, so much detail in that. Anyway, he says, "For I see this reaper." This is quite important. Okay, he says, "The study is all yellow, extremely thickly painted, but the subject was beautiful and simple." And here it is. "For I see this, I see in this reaper a vague figure toiling away for all he's worth in the midst of the heat to finish his task." Now, obviously, he sees himself as this reaper, a vague figure, in the same way that this vague figure is almost lost in the wheat. Van Gogh's self-portraits show him kind of indistinct from his surroundings. And so he says, "Is a vague figure toiling away for all he's worth." That's how he sees himself. It's a self-portrait in a sense as well. And he says, "I see in him the image of death." And that is exactly what he's been thinking about. He is thinking about death. He says, in the sense that humanity might be the wheat he is reaping. So it is, if you like, the opposite of the sower, which I tried to do before. So think about it. The sower is someone who's throwing seeds over the earth, and it's about growth and hope and faith, right? And potential and possibility. Well, someone who's reaping is someone who is kind of, it's about consequence. It's about one's comeuppance, essentially, right? He says, so it is, if you like, the opposite of the sower, which I tried to do before, but there's no sadness in this death. This one takes place in broad daylight with the sun flooding everywhere with a light of pure gold. Kind of disturbing, that statement. There's no sadness in this death. It takes place in broad daylight with the sun flooding everything. It's almost like he's saying it's meant to be, or it's the way things are. Then, well, here I am at it again, but I won't give in. I shall try once more on a new canvas. So he is trying to, resist what's going on. He says, "I could almost believe that I have a new spell of lucidity before me. So what next? Carrying on here for the next few months or moving elsewhere? I don't know. It's just that the attacks, when they come, are no joke. And running the risk of having a bout like that at your place or at anyone else's house is a serious business." Again, one can't help but wonder, did he have an attack, a bout, an episode with Gogh present? What is that like? And so it seems Van Gogh is like, I can't leave here until I can be sure I'm not going to have these attacks. I can't do this to other people. "My dear brother, I always write you in between bouts of work, and I'm working like one truly possessed." What did I say earlier? "More than ever, I'm in the grip of a pent-up fury of work, and I'm sure it'll help to cure me. Perhaps something along the lines of what Eugene Delacroix spoke of will happen to me." And so he quotes him saying, "I discovered painting when I had neither teeth or breath left. in the sense that my sad illness makes me work in a pent-up fury very slowly, but without leaving off from morning till night. And that is probably the secret, to work long and slowly. So that is what he's saying is the secret to recovery: work long and slowly. But what do I know about it? Still, I think I have one or two canvases on the go which are not too bad. Firstly, the Reaper in the yellow wheat, and the portrait on a light background, which should go to the Vinctistas. I must say that is one of his most famous paintings, bar none. So think about it. Although he's not in a happy place, although he's just come out of a very dark hole, he's actually just painted one of his most famous self-portraits. It's I think kind of what they used to market Loving Vincent. I mean, it's that good, and he paints it in the midst of this derangement, essentially, with between episodes of it. Quite amazing. Okay, he goes on to say, actually, I care very little one way or another. It might be preferable if they did forget all about me. For my part, I do not forget how inspired I am when I give my memory of certain Belgians free rein. That is the positive side, and the rest is of no more than secondary importance. And here we are in September. Soon we will be in the middle of autumn and then winter. I shall continue to work without let up, and then if I have another attack around Christmas, we'll see. And when that's over, I can't see any objection to my telling the administration here to go to hell, excuse me, and to my returning north for a fairly long time. To leave now, when I believe I may well have another attack this winter, that's to say in 3 months' time, would perhaps be too foolhardy. So he's quite practical. I mean, in the midst of his madness, he's pretty sane and sensible. It's been 6 weeks since I put a foot outdoors. Wow, look at that. Even in the garden. And I think that is really making him a bit stir crazy and making him a bit um, unhappy. Next week, however, when I finish the canvases I'm busy with, I'm going to have a go. But another few months and I'll be so flabby and lethargic that a change will probably do me a lot of good. That's the way I'm thinking at the moment, though of course nothing is settled. But I do believe that one shouldn't stand on ceremony with the people of this establishment any more than the proprietors of a hotel. We have rented a room from them for a certain length of time, and they are well paid for what they provide, and that's absolutely all there is to it. So if you read between the lines, it kind of seems like he's feeling less kind and good natured towards his jailers. You're a hotel keeper and that's it. No more, no less. Not to mention that they might like nothing better than for my condition to be chronic, and we would be unforgivably stupid to give in to them. They make far too many inquiries to my mind, not only about what I am, but also what you earn. Interesting. So let's not quarrel with them and simply give them the slip. I'm continuing this letter again at intervals. Yesterday I began the portrait of the chief attendant. So that's kind of the dude that he has to see every day. Seems quite a severe fellow, doesn't he? And I may do his wife as well, since he's married and lives in a little farmhouse a stone's throw from the institution. A most interesting face. There's a beautiful etching by Lejros of an old Spanish grandee. If you remember it, it will give you an idea of the type. Well, this is such a long letter, and my voice has not got much left in it. He was at the hospital in Marseille during two cholera epidemics. In short, he's a man who has seen an enormous amount of suffering and death, and he has an indefinable expression of quiet contemplation, so that I am irresistibly reminded of Gouzeau's face, for there is something of that in his head, if different. But he is a man of the people and simpler. Anyway, you will see it if I succeed in doing it, and if I make a copy of it. I'm struggling with all my might to keep my work under control by telling myself that success would be the lightning rod for my illness. So that's kind of that's kind of his self-talk, is he's saying, um, what is he saying? Is he saying success would be the best solution to his illness, or is he saying would make it worse? I think he's saying it would make it worse, that, if I have success now, it's actually going to worsen the condition I'm in. Do you agree with that? He says, I'm struggling with all my might to keep my work under control by telling myself that success would be the best lightning rod for my illness. Now, you don't really want lightning, do you? Do you agree that what he's getting at here is that he needs to, I don't want to say not be successful, but he needs to not yearn for success and be okay with working at a kind of more sedate pace? Because in the next sentence he says, I make sure I don't overdo things and take care to keep myself to myself. It's selfish, if you like, not getting used to my companions in misfortune here and not going around to see them, but still, I feel none the worse for it. Now, do you remember what I said earlier about if you've been ground down like to like a kernel, you don't have the resources to focus on other people and on other things. Just focus on yourself. And that's exactly what he's doing here, to his credit. He says, I'm just taking care to keep myself to myself. Good for you. He says, I'm being selfish. I'm not trying to get used to my companions in misfortune. Instead, I'm focusing on my work. My work is making headway. That's what I need. For it is absolutely vital that I do better than before, as that was not enough. I think what he means here is that I start executing better artwork. I've been at this art thing for so long, I need to start producing blockbusters. And guess what he does? Supposing I get out of here one day, wouldn't it be far better if I came back definitely capable of doing a portrait with some character than if I came back as I started? So he's thinking of growing. He's like this delicious monster and saying, maybe I could grow a little bit there. How about if I grew a little bit there as well? Maybe I could actually grow here too. That's clumsily put, for I'm well aware one cannot say I know how to do a portrait without telling a lie, because that is an infinite objective. Still, you will understand what I mean, that I must do better than before. Now, at this point, he's aiming, wishing, trying to get to the point that he can paint a portrait that's going to be of some value. And guess what? He would do that in a couple of months with a portrait that would be the biggest blockbuster up until 1990. The most expensive portrait ever sold. So he is going, this little plan that he's got here, he ends up succeeding in it. At the moment, my mind is working in an orderly way and I feel completely normal. When I look at my present condition in the hope of generally having between the attacks, if unfortunately it is to be expected that they will return from time to time, of having in between times periods of lucidity and of working, when I look at my present condition, then I do tell myself that it won't do to become obsessed with being sick, and that I must firmly continue my humble career as a painter. So, to his credit, he's not giving up. He's willing to persevere, to persist. And so staying in an asylum forever would probably be going too far. Yes, it would be. A few days ago, I was reading in the Figaro about a Russian writer. So, as deranged as he is, he's reading the local paper. He talks about a Russian writer who also suffered from a nervous illness, which, moreover, he sadly died, and which brought on terrible attacks from time to time. uh, is referring to Dostoevsky. But what is one to do? There's no remedy, or if there is one, it is to work with a will. I am dwelling on this more than I should. All in all, I prefer to be definitely ill like this than be the way I was in Paris when all this was brewing. You will also see that when you put the portrait with the light background that I've just done next to those portraits I did of myself in Paris, you really will see that I look saner now than I did then. Indeed, much more so. Definitely. Now, do you know how I read that? Where he says, if you look at the self portraits I've done of myself, that's a very personal thing. He is evaluating himself. And let's not kid ourselves. Van Gogh doesn't mince words. He'll say, I feel shit. He'll say, I feel good. He'll say, there are cockroaches in the food. He doesn't mince words, right? And he basically is kind of a straight shooter. And he basically says, if you take the portraits I've just done now, here, and you look at the ones that I did of myself in Paris, I look a lot saner now than I did then. And this is the part that I think so important and such an important insight. I've just told you that with just a day or two ago, Van Gogh was at his lowest ebb and he was thinking of taking his own life. Does that mean he was mad? And I think the best person to answer that question, was Vincent van Gogh mad, is Van Gogh, right? And it's one thing to say you have episodes and there's derangement and my thoughts aren't orderly. Madness is something different. Madness is something where you literally aren't sensible, where you don't know the difference between right and wrong, where you can't tell the difference between reality and fiction. This is not what he's going through. He does have episodes that he can't remember, but that's not madness. That is these episodes, whatever they are, right? It's a little bit like saying somebody gets drunk and can't remember. Isn't someone who has dementia? It's someone who got drunk and can't remember what happened. Maybe their real problem is that they're an alcoholic. It's not dementia, right? By the same token, if Van Gogh acts in an erratic way and he has episodes, that doesn't mean he's mad. It means he has episodes of something in between periods where he's lucid and sane. And what he's saying is a very big comment. He's saying, I look saner now. Basically, I am saner now than I was when I was in Paris. And then you've got to say, so when he was in the asylum, was he not mad? No, he wasn't. He was sick. He was having, I don't want to call it a mental breakdown because a mental breakdown suggests something, but he was having episodes, right? And it is definitely a little bit mysterious. We don't know exactly what it was. Like I said, I believe it was neurosyphilis. And and then that is something, it's a bacterial infection that can be reversed, right? And it was reversed. But what I'm trying to get at is, when I wrote my book, The Murder of Vincent van Gogh, the point I was trying to impress on my readers was that there were like three pillars. Was he mad? If he was mad, he probably cut off his ear. If he cut off his ear, he probably took his own life. But if you take away the madness narrative, do the other two still work? Can you say, well, he was this disturbed individual, he was mad, he was insane, that's why he took his own life? Well, if he wasn't mad, then A, did he take his own life? And if he did, why did he? Then also, if he wasn't mad, did he cut off his ear? If he did cut off his ear, why did he cut off his ear if he wasn't mad? And so here you have this thing, and you can do it in a sort of casual, informal parlance where you can say something like, sometimes he was mad, or sometimes he went mad. It's the same thing. He was mad. He had moments of madness. I don't think that is what we're talking about. He had moments where he had some kind of attack where he couldn't remember anything. And that made other people afraid of him, and we don't know what he was doing, right? That's very different from being insane or insensible. Okay, so let's continue. I do think it's very interesting that his own assessment of himself is that just days after he's at his lowest ebb, he says, I actually look saner now, right, than I did some other time. So I don't think he feels that he's insane or mad, because you know who's insane or mad? The other people next to him in the asylum. The other people that behave constantly in an erratic way, that are screaming, they mad. He's not. And that must have been quite reassuring. Like if he was worried, if he was sitting there, like I was saying to you guys earlier, if he couldn't remember what happened, he might have felt, wow, just I don't know what's going on with me. I don't even remember. It's almost like if you wake up and someone has been murdered in your home, part of you might be thinking, if you have these memory blanks, you might be thinking, I suppose I could have done that because I don't remember. I don't know if I did or if I didn't. And that is the scenario of Carly Gregg, which is not true, but that was the scenario they were presenting. That you just have this sudden moment of trauma, and then you go blank, and whatever you did during that, you're not responsible for. Is that what we're talking about? Sybil says, I feel so bad for people that suffered as he was in that age, no help at all. Valentine Bilby says, he may have a better understanding now of his conditions and no pretense. What I wanted to say a moment ago is possibly being in the asylum was the best place for him, because he could say, I'm not mad. These people are mad. These people are obviously mad. I'm not, at least I'm not at that level, right? And so, in a very ironic way, being there in the asylum was maybe the best place for him, where he could look at people even more pathetic than he was. I think the most pathetic a person can be is where you've lost your mind, or you have no ability to think for yourself, really. It's almost like a baby, except this isn't as an adult person, right? And so within that, he must think, I'm actually pretty sharp. I can paint, I can write, I can think. I can't actually talk to these imbeciles, and it's not worth my time, right? And that must have been, in a way, despite the horror show that he was going through, quite reassuring. Anyway, he goes on to say, I am even inclined to believe that the portrait will tell you better than my letter how I am, that it will reassure you. It took me a lot of trouble to do. And the Reaper is also going well. I think it is very, very simple. By the end of the month, I'd go so far as to say you can count on 12 size 30 canvases. Wow, he's definitely on the rebound here. But in most cases, they will be the same pictures twice over, a study and the final painting. Still, perhaps my journey to the south will yet bear fruit, for the stronger light and the blue sky teaches you to see, especially or even only if you see it for a long time. I don't know if you guys know, my great grandfather was born in the Netherlands. He was actually invited by the Queen to paint in the palace in I think Amsterdam, and he then came to South Africa. And in the beginning, if you look at his early paintings of South Africa, the sky is completely wrong. It's like a very milky, light blue color. It's like a very um, like baby blue color, and he couldn't actually get the light right here because he couldn't believe it. Like so. By the way, I've obviously lived in South Africa, but I've also been to the Netherlands and places like the UK and so on. What I'm trying to get at is the coloring and the light here in Africa definitely is far more vivid. The sky is incredibly blue. It's a very, very rich, deep, deep blue. A lot of the colors in Africa have that quality. And although he's experiencing some of it in France, and I've been to France as well, I've been to all as well, I've cycled up and past Saint-Remy. Um, I would say the African sky is bluer than the French sky, um, and certainly for longer periods. So one can only wonder if he'd come to Africa or even gone to some tropical island like Mauritius or Hawaii, what he would have made of that. But certainly coming from a country like the Netherlands, which is basically just this water drenched drain in a way. I just mean that for so many days, weeks, and months of the year, you're in this sort of waterlogged. It kind of feels like you inside a bathroom. You know, it's just the sunless dreariness, and his art luxuriated in that. I mean, there's a certain beauty in that sort of um, quagmire kind of thing, right? And I appreciate that beauty. You have a lot of that beauty in places like Scotland and the Isles of Skye, and that sort of thing. Um, so yeah, so one of the interesting transformations this artist had was literally changing from one color palette, which is when he lived in the Netherlands, to another. So basically, from excrement, mucus colored iterations of dirt and potatoes to vivid electric fields of wheat in the sunshine, kind of thing. And he basically is a colorist, he's an artist who went from, he basically, uh, he he reflected the experience that he had coming out of this dull, sunless bathroom type environment in his own art, where he said, wow, I didn't realize that the world, there's actually so much color and life and warmth and vividness in the world. And that was something he was reflecting on the canvas. Now, I doubt whether he would have painted as vividly as he did, with as much passion and all the impasto, if he was born, let's say, in France. I think you needed someone to come from quite a sort of sunless, rain drenched, boggy environment to say, wow, I can't believe that there are other places that are dry and sunny and beautiful and colorful like this. You can see how he could appreciate that after years spent in a different kind of environment. And I understand some of that, because when I lived in South Korea, it was so polluted. Some days you'd wake up and you'd think, oh, it's overcast today, only to realize, well, that grayness is actually pollution. And South Korea is also one of the most densely populated countries in the world, right? And I think the yearning that I felt for South Africa, which is a country I've got very mixed feelings about, There have been times where I couldn't wait to get out of here, right? Um, but when I was in South Korea, I just remember longing so much for the Karoo, where when you step out of your vehicle, it's so quiet and so deserted, almost anywhere in the Karoo, that you can hear your shoes crunching on the gravel. And it's a place that's guaranteed. It's a place in South Africa where you're guaranteed to be completely alone. And when you've been in the world's most populous country, that is something that you unexpectedly start pining for. It's like, I just want some space, please, right? I just want some blue sky. South Korea is also a place where I think for the first time in my life, you'd look up in the sky, and even though it was nighttime and it was cloudless, you couldn't see a single star because of the pollution. The pollution would create veils that prevented you from seeing any stars. So you'd look up and you'd be like, okay, it's night, but okay. And then in South Africa, you'd see the stars again. And there are many other examples of that. But what I'm trying to say is you can only pine for something like that to that extent when you've been deprived of it in a certain way. That's kind of what I'm getting at, right? And that is why he became such a um, intensely passionate person about color, but like color from the sun, yellow, blue. Just think about color from the sun, like when the sun's shining in the most basic way. Sun in the sky is yellow. Sun in the sky that you can see means it's likely a blue sky. And then what do you see below that? Green fields and sometimes yellow fields if it's things like crops or wheat. In those basic uh, tropes, I guess, that basic those basic concepts that he basically expressed is appreciation for not being in the Netherlands, just in terms of the landscape. It's actually quite a um, simple classical way of thinking about how he thought about painting and how he thought about the landscapes. Anyway, let's continue. The North will undoubtedly seem quite new to me, and I think he means when he returns to it. And I've looked at things so much here that I've become very attached to them, and I shall feel sad for a long time. So what he's saying here is, if I leave the South now, if I return to the North's going to actually be quite novel. I'm going to be like, look how beautiful that ditch is. Look how lovely that drain pipe is. Look how beautiful the water flows down that sort of muddy stream or whatever it is. Look how beautiful this sort of muddy field is, filled with water. It's like just this um, stretch of earth that is full of water, full of life. This chocolatey earth, and it's in the sunless area. It's just going to give forth life, kind of thing. And maybe he's going to find a lot of enthusiasm in that, because he hasn't seen that for such a long time. And that reminds him of other things: family, home, the people that know him, the people that understand him, the people that are close to him. Then he says, something odd occurs to me. In Manette Solomon, there's a discussion of modern art and some artist or other talking of what will last. And he says that what will last is the landscape painters. That view has already been proved to some extent, for Corot, Dubigny, Dupré, Rousseau, and Mallet do endure as landscape painters, and Van Gogh would certainly as well. And when Corot said on his deathbed, I saw landscapes in a dream with skies all pink, it was charming. Well, yes, we see those skies all pink in Monet, Pissarro, and Renoir. So the landscape painters do last very well. It's quite true. We'll leave aside the figure painting of Delacroix and Mallet. In any case, what is it that we are now beginning hesitatingly to recognize as original and long lasting? Portraiture. You might say that it's old stuff, but it's also quite new. We'll talk about it again. But we must never stop being on the lookout for portraits, especially by artists such as Gulamine, that portrait of the young girl by Gulamine. Wonder if we can find it quickly. So this is from the Van Gogh Museum. Um, I don't know. It's not terribly. I'm not overawed by it, but Van Gogh seems to like it. What do you think? Portrait of a Young Woman by Armand Guillaumin, painted in 1886. So painted 3 years before this letter. I'm not sure if I would want her as a girlfriend. What is quite interesting with this picture is how the wall around her is a similar pattern in a way to the chair. Of course, she does stand out from it, but I wonder whether Van Gogh didn't use this technique. I mean, he's talking about it. This is a very similar color to the color that he chose for his last self-portrait. This color here. Anyway, I must say, to me, it's not the nicest thing I've ever seen. It says, "Take good care of my portrait by Russell, which I'm so fond of. Have you framed Laval's portrait? I don't think you told me what you thought of it." Okay. I thought it splendid. That gaze through the glass is such a frank gaze. Okay. My urge to do portraits is very strong these days. In fact, Gauguin and I talked about this in similar matters until our nerves were strained to the point of stifling all human warmth. So here again, he acknowledges that Gauguin and him got in one another's nerves, that their nerves were strained to breaking point. It says, "I dare say some pictures will come out of it, and that's what we're after. And I should imagine they'll be doing some good work in Brittany. I got a letter from Gauguin, I think I already told you, and one day I should very much like to see what they're doing." So um, Gauguin did write to him. We don't know what he wrote because we don't have it. Um, he didn't say much more than that. Then I promised the attendant here a copy of Le Monde Illustré number 1684, in which there's a pretty engraving of de Montbreton. There, the reap is finished. So you can imagine that he writes a couple of things, paints, then comes back to his letter as though he's having a conversation. There, the reap is finished. I think it'll be one of those you'll keep at home. It's an image of death, as the great book of nature speaks of it. But the effect I've been looking for is on the point of smiling. Okay. It's all yellow except for a line of purple hills, a pale and golden yellow. I find it odd that I saw it like that through the iron bars of a cell. Well, do you know what I hope for once I allow myself begin to hope? It is that the family will be for you what nature, the lumps of soil, the grass, the yellow wheat, the peasant are for me. In other words, that you find in your love for people something not only to work for, but to comfort and restore you when you need it. So it's quite interesting. He's saying that his work comforts and restores him. And I guess he wants his work and his paintings to comfort and to restore people, which I think it kind of has. But he's saying, I'm wishing that your family is going to do that, comfort and restore you when you need it. So I beg you not to let yourself get too exhausted by business, but to take good care of yourselves, both of you. Perhaps there will still be some good in the not too distant future. So one does wonder, when is Theo going to reply? How long has it been? He says, "I've a good mind to do the Reaper over again for Mother. If not, I'll do another picture for her birthday. It'll be coming later, as I'll send it on with the rest. For I am convinced that Mother would understand it, since it is, in fact, as simple as one of those primitive woodcuts one finds in farmers' almanacs. Send me the canvas as soon as you can, for if I still want to do other copies for the sisters, and if I am to make a start on the new autumn effects, I'll have enough to fill my time from the beginning of this month to the end. I'm eating and drinking like a horse at present. I must say that the doctor is taking very good care of me. Yes, I do not think that it's a good idea to do some pictures for Holland, for mother and our two sisters. He says, I do think it's a good idea. That will make three. That is to say, the reaper, the bedroom, the olive trees, wheat field, and cypress. I will even make four, for there's somebody else I'm going to do one for as well. I shall work at that, of course, with as much pleasure as for the Vinctistas and more calmly. Since I feel strong, you may be sure that I shall get through a lot of work. I'm choosing the best from the 12 subjects so that what they'll get will have been thought about a bit and specially picked. And then it's a good thing to work for people who don't know what a picture is. A good handshake for you and Joe, Vincent. And then he says, I've reopened this letter again to tell you that I've just seen Monsieur Peyron. I haven't seen him for 6 days. He told me that this month he expects to go to Paris and he will see you there. This pleases me because he has, this is certain, lots of experience, and I know he will tell you frankly what he thinks. To me, and he said, hope that it never comes back, but I expect it to return for a good long time, at least for several years. So Van Gogh certainly isn't kidding himself. But I also expect that work, far from being impossible for me in the intervals, can go on as usual, and it may even be my remedy. And then once again, I tell you, other than my Dr. Peyron, that with regard to the administration, it is probably necessary to be polite, but we must limit ourselves to that and not bind ourselves to anything. That's another reference to uh, the people here are kind of cuckoo, kind of weird. Even the staff here, let's just deal with them in a business-like way. It is a very serious thought that wherever I should live here for any length of time, I would perhaps be subject to popular prejudices. I do not even know what these prejudices are that would make my life with them unbearable. But after all, I will wait for what Peyron says to you. I have no idea what his opinion may be. So this is obviously Peyron's assessment of him, Peyron's diagnosis, like what is going on with your brother. This afternoon, I have been working on the portrait of the attendant, which is getting on. If it were not a good deal softened, completely softened by an intelligent look and an expression of kindliness, it would be a veritable bird of prey. It is very much a southern type. I wonder whether Monsieur Peyron's intended journey will come off this time. I'm very curious to know what may come of it. After another year, I shall perhaps attain command of myself from the artistic point of view. So he's already thinking long term. He's thinking, I think I'm going to be here another year, and then maybe I'll be okay. And that was quite realistic at the end of the day. It is always a thing worth seeking, but for that I must have some luck. What I dream of in my best moments is not so much striking color effects. What I dream of is he dreams of color, striking color effects as once more the half tones, and certainly the visit to the Montpellier Gallery contributed to turning my ideas this way. For what touched me there, even more than the magnificent Courbet, which are marvels, the village girls, the sleeping spinner, were the portraits of Brias by Delacroix. I think we've looked at these. Let's just see if we can bring them up again. And guess where this is being displayed? The Met in Manhattan. You guys know that the Metropolitan Museum is just off the Central Park. So that's what he's referring to. And then he says, but in these half tones, what choice and what quality? It is time I sent this letter off at last. I could tell you in 2 pages what it contains, that is to say, nothing new, but then I haven't time to do it again. A good handshake once more, and if it is not too much trouble, let me have the canvas as soon as possible. Ever yours, Vincent. So now we go from the 5th or 6th of September to the 5th of September. It's a letter from Theo, and he says, my dear Vincent, you gave me great pleasure by writing me a letter when one knows, excuse me, when one knows nothing one is inclined to think. Sorry, let me read that again. When one knows nothing, one is inclined to think things are worse than they really are. It is bad enough in itself that you've had a crisis, but unfortunately, I see from your letter that at present you are feeling better. The view from your window, which you give a sketch of, ought to be very fine. In Paris, one is sometimes dying for a look at the real countryside. At least you have a fragment of it at your disposal. In the environs of Paris, you never see any peasants, and in truth, I no longer know the harvest times for wheat and potatoes. Bear in mind, in the Netherlands, they kind of were, I wouldn't say country bumpkins, but they were pretty much in villages that were um, kind of adjacent to the countryside, so they would tend to know when it was harvest time. It is a fact that in town you meet people who are certainly interesting too, but at times you have had enough of it, and so as long as you cannot go there, a picture of the true countryside does you good, and certainly at such moments of surfeit, a bodmer will give you as much pleasure, or rather more than some picture done with a scientifically clever technique. What's funny that he talks about that, given what we having a look at there and there and there and there. Anyway, he goes on to say, but without that true and wholesome something which is to be found in a slice of brown bread. Rousseau, too, has something of this knowledge. At the exhibition, there are pictures of his with bits of forest in which you can recognize all the species of trees with an undergrowth of true heath and true toadstools beneath. Surely, if such fellows are no artists, and one would have to be damned exacting not to take them as such. In any case, they are men, and one should wish the world to be full of them. There you have old Father Pizarro, who, notwithstanding everything, has done very fine things recently. And in them, you also find those qualities of rusticity, what a great word, which show immediately that man is more at ease in wooden shoes than in patent leather boots. A short time ago, he lost his mother, who was very old, and yet it was a hard blow for him. He also had an operation performed on one of his eyes, but I do not think it was improved by it. He's continually wearing some kind of muzzle, which bothers him a good deal. He has great difficulty selling his stuff, and he has been through hard times, but he is always full of courage. One of his sons is in London, and it appears that they have schools there where one is taught decorative art and where the pupils are absolutely free to treat the subject as they understand it. The first thing they gave him to do was a frieze composed of brambles. It would be a good thing if they did the same here, for by letting the fellows follow their own inclinations, they would find ornaments drawn from the source of nature, and the result might be a great change in the art of interior decoration, etc. It is a pity that the Impressionists are unknown in England. There must be people over there who would like them. This week, Tierstik sent me 8 watercolors by J.H. Weissenbruch, who in parentheses is not dead. They are very, very fine. Although he does not concern himself with details of the vegetation, he knows the character of the Dutch countryside as Dumier knows his barristers, the misshapen trees, the muddy paths across the meadows, and how his skies are like those you see in Holland. I'm very glad that Tierstig has had the courage to buy them from him. He's always the same. He invariably begins by saying no, and then after some time he goes back on it and often changes his mind. Here, where they've understood Jonkend, if you translate that literally, it translates to young child, Jonkend. They will also be able to understand this one. In any case, one might try it. Gauguin has sent me some new canvases. He tells me that he hesitated to send them because what he is striving for is not in them, as he should have wished. Now, bear in mind, Gauguin has a contractual relationship with Theo. Theo is basically selling his art, you know, for Gauguin. He says he did find it in other canvases which are not dry yet. However, in my opinion, it is a certain fact that this consignment is not as good as the one he sent last year. There is one canvas, however, which is a really fine Gauguin once again. He calls it La Belle Angèle. Let's have a look at it. And this is currently being exhibited at the Musée d'Orsay in Paris. And it's this picture. So, you might be reading this and saying, blah, 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 this picture, that picture. Well, this picture has just been sent to Theo, and it's going to end up in the really prestigious Musée d'Orsay in Paris. It's going to become basically I won't say world famous painting, but a very prominent picture. I can't say I'm crazy about it, but there you have it. Okay. So it says it's a portrait. It's a portrait put down on the canvas like the big heads in the Japanese crepons. There's a bust portrait with its outlines, and then the background. There's a Breton woman seated, the hands folded, black dress, lilac apron, and a white ruff. The outlines are grey, in the background of a beautiful blue lilac with pink and red flowers. The expression of the head and the attitude are very well found. The woman is somewhat like a young cow. Sorry for but there is something so fresh in it, and then again something so countrified that it is very pleasant to see. Okay. Does she look like a young cow? Anyway, let's continue. Okay, sorry, I didn't expect that. Now, I still have to tell you that the exhibition of the Independence is open and that your two pieces are there, the irises, that's this one. So that is a pretty good, it's one of his best paintings as far as I'm concerned. And the Starlit Night, that's this one. Also not a bad picture. I've actually walked along this part of Hull, and I've stood right over here. There's a panel. When you stand here, there's a panel that shows this picture and that he painted it there. So I've seen that as well. The ladder is hung badly, for one cannot put oneself at a sufficient distance as the room is very narrow, but the other one makes an extremely good showing. They put it on the narrow wall of the room and it strikes the eye from afar. It is a beautiful study full of air and life. There are some Lautrecs which are very powerful in effect, among other things, a ball at the Moulin de la Galette, which is very good. Let's see if we can find that. So what is really amazing and interesting with these Van Gogh letters is through words, it introduces us to other artists, other pictures, other lives, other landscapes. It is quite amazing. Now, this Moulin de la Galette is actually being exhibited in Chicago, of all places, the Art Institute of Chicago. Can you guys see that? It's got a bit of a Sherlock Holmes quality to it. Okay, let's continue. The painters could only send in 2 pictures each, as the exhibition is held in a much smaller place than the one it was held in till now. Surat has sea beaches, Senior 2 landscapes. There's also a picture by Hayet, the friend of Lucien Pissarro's, the Place de la Concorde in the evening with carriages, the gas jets, etc. Let's have a look at that, if we can. Well, Google translates that to Hyatt Place de la Concorde. No, that's not what we're looking for. Hyatt. So I think it's this. I don't know if it's. I think it's this picture. Louis Hayet, painted in 1888. Not crazy about it. It's kind of like looking through a bathroom window. Suppose if you turn your engines on in terms of your imagination, you can imagine this coming to life and all these vague figures starting to sort of animate. You can sort of see that. Okay, and then it is something like that picture of the tumblers by Surat, but it is more harmonious. Let's see if we can find that. This is also something that you see at the Met. Well, these are some of his pictures. Let's have a look. Well, basically that one. Macro X-ray fluorescence map of calcium distribution showing the chalk lines of the compositional grid and some underdrawing. Okay. Okay, let's wrap up this letter. He says, we are in good health. I hardly cough anymore and I'm feeling stronger. Joe too is quite well. One begins to see that she's pregnant, but it does not hinder her yet. One of the sisters is staying with us at the moment. Mother's had a letter from Cord. He's far away already and was in good health. You may remember Cord is now on his way to South Africa, right? Cord would actually die in South Africa, not much more than an hour's drive from where I'm sitting, chatting to you guys. Do write me a few words if you feel like it. And once again, many thanks for your letter. Be of good heart, and a cordial handshake also from Joe. Okay. That's 5th of September, then 7 to 8. My dear Theo, I think what you say in your letter is quite right, that Rousseau and artists such as Bodmer are in any case men, and that one would want the world to be peopled with men like them. Indeed, yes, that's how I feel. And that J.H. Wissenbrock knows and does the muddy towpaths, the stunted willows, the foreshortenings, and skillful and strange perspectives of the canals, as Dumier does the lawyers. I think that's perfect. Turstig has done well to buy some of his work. The reason people like that don't sell is, I think, because there are too many dealers trying to sell other things with which they deceive and mislead the public. Do you know that even today, when I chance upon the story of some energetic industrialist or even more of some publisher, I still feel the same indignation, the same rage as I used to when I was with Goupil and Key. Life passes in this way, time does not return, but I'm working furiously for the very reason that I know that opportunities for work do not recur. Especially in my case, where a more violent attack could destroy my ability to paint for good. Now imagine that, imagine living under the sword of Damocles. Is that the right way of saying it? Where after any attack, you may feel like you're so impaired that you can't paint anymore. You know, during the attacks, I feel cowardly in the face of the pain and suffering, more cowardly than is justified. And perhaps it is this moral cowardice itself, which previously I had no desire to cure, that now makes me eat for two, work hard, and limit my relations with the other patients. So, this is his own sort of regimen for recovery. Eat for two, eat, make sure you eat enough. Work hard, limit your relations with the other patients. He says, I am trying to recover, like someone who's meant to commit that, but then makes for the bank because he finds the water too cold. So, yeah, yeah, you actually have him saying to his brother, well, making that reference to that, he actually says it to his brother, but he's saying, I am trying to recover. My dear brother, you know that I came to the South and threw myself into work for 1,000 reasons, looking for a different light, believing that observing nature under a brighter sky might give one a more accurate idea of the way the Japanese feel and draw. It's 20 past 1 here. I need to wrap up. Are you guys yawning? Did I infect you guys with my yawn? Anyone? Anyway, he says, I'm looking for a different light, believing that observing nature under a brighter sky might give one a more accurate idea of the way the Japanese feel and draw. Okay, Robbie Robin, I've transferred a yawn all the way across the pond to where you are. Iceland, uh, uh, Iceland, I think you're going to have to yawn, Iceland. I mean, anyway, small things amuse small minds, right? Wanting finally to see the strongest sun because one has the feeling that unless one knows it, one would not be able to understand the pictures of Delacroix as far as execution and technique are concerned, and because one feels that the colors of the prism are veiled in the mists of the north. Slight feels, I mean, I think you really wanna yawn, Iceland. All this remains more or less true. Then, if one adds that heartfelt leaning towards the south, Daudet described in Tartarin, and the fact that from time to time I've also found friends and the things to love here, then you will understand that however horrible I find my illness, I have the feeling that I've formed ties here that are a little too strong, ties that could later make me long to come back and work here again. Despite all this, it could be that I shall be returning to the north fairly soon. Yes, for I shall not conceal from you that in the same way that I am at present Anyone yawned? Okay, Chelsea's yawned. Uh, Robbie has yawned again. Anyone else yawn there? Vibing energy. Okay, thanks. Um, he says, I have a terrible craving to see my friends again in the countryside of the north. Work is going very well. I'm discovering things I've sought in vain for years. And aware of that, I'm constantly reminded of that saying of Delacroix, that he discovered painting when he had neither breath nor teeth left. Oh, well, there he says, with my mental illness, I think of so many other artists suffering mentally. Do you think he's talking about mental illness in the conventional sense? Do you think it is mental illness? Oh, it came out of nowhere. Guys, I think I'm masters. I can't stop yawning. Um, I think of so many other artists suffering mentally and tell myself that it doesn't stop one from carrying on one's trade as painter as if nothing had gone wrong. This is such a long letter. I just don't think I'm going to be able to do it. Where are we? 7th or 8th September. And then 18th September, 19th September, 19th September, 19th September, 28th September. So I think maybe next Sunday we can continue where we're leaving off now. So it's this letter from the this letter from the 7th or 8th of September, and we've kind of gotten to around about here, where he says work is going very well. So we'll try and remember that that's in line with the night cafe. And he says, I see that here the attacks tend to take an absurdly religious turn. So I think we'll end off over there. Before I do end off, I just want to show you guys these articles. So here's one from CNN. Turbulent skies of Vincent van Gogh, the story not aligned with the scientific theory study finds. So it says here the dappled starlight and swirling clouds of starry night are thought to reflect the artist's tumultuous state of mind when he painted the work in 1889. We actually know that he was trying to communicate more than that. He was trying to convey starts with an S. What's that word? It means trying to convey. Can you guys help me? What is he trying to convey in Starry Night? Solace. That's the word. Solace. For the human condition. Almost like a prayer. If you wanna feel or hear a song that conveys that sense of solace, of comfort, you should listen to the Stable Song by Gregory Alan Isakov. Is actually formerly a South African living in Colorado. Such a beautiful song. It's had just under 8 million views. I'm going to put a link to that in chat. If you want to experience the solace, the comfort of a song, listen to this song that I've just put in chat. What does solace mean? It means, the actual word I was looking for is consolation. That's actually the word I'm looking for, consolation. But it means comfort, relief, consolation. And can I tell you, no matter what, no matter how old you are, no matter how happy you are, no matter how successful you are, everyone, every human being needs consolation at some point
Consolation.
because of the fact that none of us are going to make it out of this alive. The human condition means we are aware of our own death, and that is something that needs consolation in sickness or in health, especially in sickness, whether we're young or old, but especially if we're older, right? And so, well, Robbie Robinson says the dark unconsciousness train in your book is chilling. Thanks for that. Okay, so let's just read the rest. He says, in a new analysis by physicists based in China and France, it suggests the artist had a deep intuitive understanding of the mathematical structure of turbulent flow, but basically that he had a deep intuitive understanding of a natural process that science has only just discovered relatively recently. As a common natural phenomenon observed in fluids, moving water, ocean currents, blood flow, billowing storm clouds, and plumes of smoke, turbulent flow is chaotic as larger swirls or eddies form and break down into smaller ones. It may appear random to the casual observer, but turbulence nonetheless follows a cascading pattern that can be studied and at least partially explained using mathematical equations. And then you have this Chinese dude explaining. Imagine you standing on a bridge. Timmy, imagine you standing on a bridge and you watch the river flow and you can see the swirls on the surface. And these swirls are not random, they arrange themselves in specific patterns. And so you can see with all of this angst and all of this suffering, Van Gogh is actually onto something. He is intuiting, in a way, the magic of the universe, in a way that is going to resonate, that is going to reference across time. I injured my right leg in a car accident when I was a teenager and really damaged my knee. And so I often have pain in my right knee, knots and so on. I mean, I've been able to do triathlons and so on. Again, the amazing ability of nature to rejuvenate. But um, writing for 10 years just about wasn't good for me physically. And as a result, it's been quite difficult to kind of get back. And so what I just found really amazing was going to the physiotherapist. And they do something called dry needling, and her sticking the dry needle into like a knot in your muscle. And then she used the word, it references other parts, like your toes or your, and it was just really amazing to have this involuntary process taking place, that you've got this incredible clockwork, all of these dynamics, these spider webs um, that are distributed within the human body that you don't have any say over, that are just automatic, that are just by design, and yet they are very real. You have these invisible networks that have got a job to do, right? And there's very sensitive things going on in our own bodies that we aren't aware of, and in the same way in our minds, right? And by the same token, in Vincent van Gogh's art, dry needling is kind of like acupuncture, but slightly different. So he goes on to say, the Starry Night is an oil on canvas painting that the study noted depicts a view just before sunrise from the east-facing window of the artist's asylum room at Saint-Rémy de Provence in southern France. Van Gogh what? Had admitted himself to an asylum there, okay? And there you have it, where they're showing these, they've done kind of a study of it. They studied the 14 whirls or eddies in Van Gogh's celebrated painting. Again, now you've got to say, is he mad? or is he in touch with the universe? The atmospheric motion of the painted sky cannot be directly measured, so Huang and his colleagues precisely measured the brushstrokes and compared the size of the brushstrokes to the mathematical scales expected from turbulence theories. To gauge physical movement, they used the relative brightness or luminescence of varying paint colors. They discovered that the sizes of the 14 whirls or eddies in a starry night follow a physical law that governs fluid dynamics known as Kolmogorov's theory of turbulence. In the 1940s, Soviet mathematician Andrei Kolmogorov described a mathematical relationship between the fluctuations in a flow's speed and the rate at which its energy dissipates. Wang and the team also found that the paint at the smallest scale mixes around with some background swirls and whirls in a fashion predicted by turbulence theory, following a statistical pattern known as Batchelor scaling. Batchelor scaling mathematically represents how small particles such as drifting algae in the ocean or pieces of dust in the wind are passively mixed around by turbulent flow. This is cool. Indeed, this is the type of statistics you would expect from algae blooms being swept around by ocean currents. That's according to a postdoctoral researcher in the Department of Astrophysical Sciences at Princeton University in New Jersey in an email. This is an image of Jupiter, the great spot. The study team performed the same analysis and detected the same phenomenon in two other images. One, a painting, Chain Pier, Brighton, created by British artist John Constable. So I think that's this one. So can you see in these clouds up here? Probably in the waves as well. And the other, a photograph of Jupiter's great red spot. Unlike the Starry Night, this painting lacks well-defined swirling patterns, but the clouds are rich of structures with different scales, resembling those frequently seen in the sky. On display at the Museum of Modern Art in New York, the Starry Night is an enormously popular work of art that has been recreated in Lego bricks, drones, and dominoes. Wang said that scientists had long struggled to describe turbulent flow in fluid dynamics in a way that would allow them to predict the phenomenon, and that a complete explanation remains a prevailing mystery of physics. A thorough understanding would help with weather forecasting. Look at that. A thorough understanding would help with weather forecasting, flight turbulence, and many other processes. Even after more than 100 years of study, we even don't know how to define this complex phenomenon. It's extremely important, but it's extremely difficult. The fact that Starry Night matched statistical models of turbulence, even though the artwork doesn't actually move, could suggest that the statistical methods and tools are less precise than scientists may have thought, Beatty said. The painting can't be precisely measured because it's actually not turbulence. It has no kinetic energy. And so, yeah, it's pretty interesting, isn't it? Analysis reveals Van Gogh's brilliant understanding of fluid dynamics in the Starry Night. So I'm going to read a quick thing here. Scientists fascinated by Van Gogh's art are not limited to physicists. When researchers discovered a gecko that reminded them of the paintings of Van Gogh, they gave it the scientific name Nemapsis van Goghi. As a common term, the author suggested Van Gogh's starry dwarf gecko. Let's see what we see there. How's that? Van Gogh's starry dwarf gecko. You can read that if you like. In terms of this, just have a look. The Dutch artist created the masterpiece from a psychiatric facility, which he had checked into after experiencing hallucinations. While the work is sometimes interpreted as an expression of his mental health challenges, a new study suggests that it also aligns with Kolmogorov's theory of turbulence. Well, this seems very similar to what we read elsewhere. And then this is just from the Art newspaper, just a exhibition that is being held in London, I guess. So there you can see some of his paintings, all on show in London. And so there's the picture that we've just dealt with. And that self-portrait once hung in Regent's Park. There you can see it over there. And painted on a dish towel. Van Gogh's large plane trees with several red marks on the Tushan fabric indicated. So he also painted this. He painted this in December in Saint-Remy. It's quite a nice painting. Look at that. I really like these big trees here. I don't really like the figures. I mean, look at that. Seems a bit slapdash. That's all, I think. The Trinquetal Bridge, June 1988. I've walked around there. There's a staircase that sort of comes up there. That person there almost looks like the Scream, just like a part out of that. Van Gogh's Roses, April 1889. So he also painted this probably just before, I think just before he left the asylum. And then this is Public Garden in all. When things were still going quite well for him. Sunflowers. Almost look identical, right? You can see that's slightly brighter than that. And I think that's a grasshopper that's stuck in the art, in the picture. You can see it over there. That's really getting up close and personal with your subject matter. And is there anything else? Well, this is quite an amazing portrait. I mean, this I don't actually know if do you think that's a Van Gogh, a genuine Van Gogh? If it is, it's one of his best portraits. Not sure if I've seen that one before. And then let's go down to the next one. I don't know if I've seen that one. That was painted in when? May 1888. Okay, not bad. Well, I'm sure you'll agree that was really worth looking at. So it's this exhibition, rave reviews, a lot of people enjoying it from at London's National Gallery. The Times called it a once-in-a-century show. Okay. There's just a couple more pictures of it or from it. Look at this one. Vivid, right? Anyway, that's it from me. I think the last thing I've got to show you is just a little video clip. It just brings Van Gogh to life a little bit. Just see if I can find it. Um, I'm just going to play just like a slight clip from. Let me just take the sound off from this video, and it just gives you kind of a sense what his source is, right? These are real places that he painted, including this bridge that you see over there, right? That's the real thing that he's painting. So while using colors and shapes and things, it was once a reality that he saw, just like you seeing reality, and it's something one must kind of remember, right? Is that you must almost try and see through the representations to see another reality, another time, another place. So there's a good example of what I was saying earlier about he painted that in 1885. And what I was saying about his art during the period when he lived in the Netherlands, it's all dark. It's like painted in a bathroom. It's sunless. It's wet. It's sort of brooding and miserable. And that is why the French countryside was such a sort of blistering experience for him. You know, the sky like a heartbreaking blue. The yellow, such a warm, rich, beautiful color for him. You know, if you're not seeing that on a daily basis, one day when you do see it, it is quite magnificent, right? That's George Surratt. Valentine Bilby says, I have to drive now. Thanks for joining us. Let's just end off with some of these. So I just wanted to share some of that with you. I think that came from a Christie's auction. So yeah, I will try to be back. Well, this is a long live, 3 hours. I'll try to be back next Sunday at around about this time, where we'll deal with the letters at the near the end of September, going into early October. Okay. Thanks everyone for joining us. Chelsea, I know you were um, really looking forward to this episode. So I hope it's all that you were looking forward to or hoping for, all that you expected. Mouse says thank you for doing these, very enjoyable. Ison, I'm glad that you joined us. I think you missed a part in the beginning. See if you can catch up on that. Just thank you again to Robbie, Robin, Yvonne, Chris Cavey, Deborah, all of you guys for super chats. Appreciate it. And yeah, guess that's it from me. What else is there to say? Yeah, it's just really, really cold here, but it will be warming up this week. Again, I'll keep you guys up to date on the delicious monster as it kind of makes its comeback from its near death experience. Um, but yeah, I must say it was fascinating for me to just see. I didn't even know that plant could do that. Something else that's quite interesting is my father tells me that apple trees and roses are from the same family. And it actually seems that certainly those in my garden are flowering at the same time. So the apple tree that's outside my window, just over there, is budding right now, and I've got roses in my back garden that are also just about to bud. So it's quite interesting. Did you know that apple trees and roses are basically from the same family? I think it's quite interesting. Okay, guys. Timmy wants to go and sleep. I think it is quite late. It's 1:45 in the morning. Um, thanks everyone for being here, and yeah, take care, and I'll see you guys next time. Ciao.